The most powerful man in Chicago sat perfectly still, staring at an empty chair. Her chair. The leather still held the impression of her body. He pressed 2 fingers against the worn notebook she'd left behind, the only thing she'd left behind. And she left nothing behind. He couldn't explain why that destroyed him. Dominic Serrano stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, Lake Michigan stretching out 40 stories below like a slab of black glass. Behind him, on the desk, sat a worn brown leather notebook with an elastic strap. The only thing she'd left. He picked it up for the 3rd time that hour, turned it over in his hands, ran his thumb across the cracked spine. His Patek Philippe Nautilus caught the low light, brushed platinum against scarred knuckles. The Macallan 18 on the corner of his desk hadn't been touched. The ice had melted 2 hours ago. The chair across from him was empty. He set the notebook down, pressed his palms flat against the desktop. His pale, ice-blue eyes, heavy-lidded and unsettlingly still, fixed on the elastic strap like it owed him an answer. It didn't give him one. 6 months earlier, Hargrove Logistics occupied the 4th floor of a forgettable office building on West Randolph, the kind of place where the elevator smelled like burnt coffee and the carpet hadn't been replaced since the Clinton administration. A mid-level shipping coordination firm pulling maybe $30 million a year in revenue, and every cent of operational competence in that building lived inside one person. Nora Cafferty didn't have a title that reflected that. Her badge said Logistics Coordinator 2. Her salary said $58,000. Her hours said 60 a week minimum. And her body, size 20, 230 pounds of soft, heavy curves, packed into an oatmeal-colored cardigan over a dark navy blouse, black stretch slacks, scuffed ballet flats that had seen better days. Her body said invisible. That's what they decided anyway. She sat at her desk with her brown leather notebook open, a pen moving in tight, efficient strokes across a page dense with port codes and container routing sequences. $14 million in Pacific Rim container shipments had gotten tangled in a scheduling conflict across 3 ports. 2 other coordinators had spent a full week on it. Nora untangled the whole thing in an afternoon, rerouting through Busan instead of Shanghai, catching a billing discrepancy that had been leaking $40,000 a quarter for over a year. She flagged it, documented it, slid the report into her supervisor's inbox. Her supervisor was Victor Hargrove. Victor Hargrove, 5'10", barrel-chested, thinning, sandy gray hair combed over a receding hairline, small, pale brown eyes set too close together, gold signet ring on his right pinky catching the fluorescent light every time he jabbed his finger at someone during a meeting, which was often. The man sweated through his white dress shirts by 11 a.m. and loosened his yellow silk tie like it was choking him, which frankly would have been doing the world a favor. The client meeting happened on a Tuesday. Hargrove stood at the head of the conference table presenting Nora's routing solution, her analysis, her numbers, her port optimization, to a room full of suits from a major retail chain. He used the word I 14 times. Nora counted. She sat in the back row, her wide hips pressed tight against the arms of a conference chair that was never built for her body, cardigan pulled across her chest, notebook balanced on her thick thighs. He didn't introduce her, didn't gesture toward her, didn't even say the word team. Just I, and a smug tilt of his weak chin while the clients nodded along. She swallowed it, like she always did. Then came the company lunch. Break room. 15 co-workers milling around a spread of grocery store sandwiches and a sheet cake for someone's work anniversary. Nora stood near the counter, her fair pink cheeks flushed warm the way they always got in crowded rooms, a scatter of pale freckles visible across the bridge of her small, upturned nose. She'd eaten half a sandwich. She reached for a second slice of cake. Victor Hargrove's voice cut across the room like a car alarm. Jesus, Cafferty, maybe if you spent as much energy on the treadmill as you do on the dessert table, you'd fit in the damn chair. Silence. Not the good kind. The kind where 15 adults suddenly find the floor fascinating. 2 junior employees near the water cooler snickered, short, ugly little laughs that they tried to swallow and couldn't. Nora's gray-green eyes went wide, her rounded cheeks flushed from warm to scarlet. The birthmark on the left side of her neck, that small thumbprint-shaped mark just below her ear, pulsed with the heat rushing up from her chest. She set the cake down. Her hand was steady. Her throat was not. She didn't eat for the rest of the day. A week later, Hargrove called it restructuring, told HR she wasn't a culture fit. Sat there in his office with his legs spread wide and his vest straining over his soft gut, the sheer audacity of this man, and handed her a separation agreement like he was doing her a favor. Culture fit. Everyone in that building knew exactly what that meant. Nora packed her desk into a single banker's box, walked past rows of coworkers who didn't look up from their screens. Not one of them said goodbye. Her apartment in Pilsen was small, $1,400 a month, which had felt manageable when she had a paycheck. $23,000 in student debt sitting on top of it, savings that started thin and got thinner. She applied to 47 jobs in 2 weeks, got 3 callbacks, 1 actual interview where a hiring manager in a fitted blazer glanced at her body, 1 quick sweep top to bottom, that clinical little inventory, and said they were looking for someone more client-facing. More client-facing, sure. She stopped leaving the apartment. Then the call came. A logistics recruiter with a strange offer. Executive assistant position, private firm, $95,000 a year. NDA required before the interview even started. Nora almost hung up. Almost. But $23,000 in debt has a way of keeping you on the line. She walked into the Drake Hotel lobby in her best cardigan and her worst confidence, clutching her worn brown leather notebook against her chest like a shield. A man in a dark suit, Dominic Serrano's lieutenant, sat her at a corner table and slid a printed sheet across the white linen. A shipping route optimization. 7 ports, 16 variables, overlapping customs windows. Nora uncapped her pen. 9 minutes. She solved it in 9 minutes. The lieutenant stared at the notebook page, then at her, then back at the page. The job was hers. 3 days later, Nora sat at her assistant's desk outside Dominic's office, invisible to him as he walked past without a glance, her notebook open to a page of meticulous logistics calculations that just saved his operation $2.3 million, and she closed it quietly, swallowing the ache. The next morning, she walked into a world that didn't belong to her and never would. 40 floors up on Lakeshore Drive, the elevator doors parted onto white Italian marble and floor-to-ceiling glass that turned Lake Michigan into a living painting. Nora Cafferty stood there in her oatmeal cardigan and black stretch slacks, her scuffed ballet flats suddenly obscene against stone that probably cost more per square foot than her entire apartment. Her brown leather notebook was tucked under her left arm, elastic strap snapped tight. She gripped it harder. The penthouse office suite operated like a living organism with its own circulatory system. Men in dark suits moved through it with the precise choreography of people who understood that hesitation got you killed. Nobody ran. Nobody raised a voice. Phones rang once before being answered. Doors opened and closed without sound. The air smelled like sandalwood and something metallic she couldn't name. And at the center of all of it, visible through the frosted glass partition of the corner office, Dominic Serrano sat behind a desk the size of a small boat, his charcoal Tom Ford 3-piece cut so clean against his frame it looked painted on. The brushed platinum Patek Philippe on his left wrist caught the morning light every time he turned a page. He didn't look up when she arrived. He didn't look up when a man with a shaved head and a neck like a fire hydrant led her to a desk positioned 6 feet from Dominic's office door. "You sit here," the man said. "You organize his schedule. You manage logistics for the import operations. You do not ask questions. You do not speak to anyone in this office unless spoken to first. You do not enter his office without knocking. You do not touch anything on his desk. Clear?" Nora nodded once, her gray-green eyes wide, the pale freckles across the bridge of her nose standing out against skin that had gone 3 shades whiter. "Clear," she whispered. That was the last time anyone spoke directly to her for 11 days. She became furniture, a desk with a heartbeat. Dominic walked past her a dozen times a day and never once made eye contact. When he needed something, he spoke to the air slightly above her head. "Tell the assistant to pull the Calumet port files." Not Nora, not even you, the assistant. A function, not a person. She might as well have been a printer that occasionally needed paper. She shrank into it. The oatmeal cardigan came off the back of her chair and went onto her shoulders like a cocoon, wrapped tight across her generous bust, pulled closed over her thick waist. She ate lunch at her desk every single day, always something small, a container of soup or half a sandwich from the deli on the ground floor, and she always turned her chair so her back faced the room, so nobody could watch her chew, so nobody could calculate how many calories the fat girl was consuming and judge her for every bite. At exactly 6 p.m. each evening, Dominic poured 2 fingers of Macallan 18 into a cut crystal glass. Nora learned the sound of it, the soft clink of the decanter lid, the amber liquid catching light through frosted glass. He drank it standing at his window with his back to the world. At 9 p.m., he loosened his gunmetal cufflinks, first the left, then the right, and rolled each sleeve exactly once. These were the rhythms of her invisible life. But here's the thing about putting a genius in a cage. The cage doesn't hold, it just delays the inevitable. By week 2, Nora couldn't stop seeing it. The shipping routes sprawled across the logistics software were a catastrophe of redundancy. Containers bouncing between 3 intermediary ports when one would do. Trucks deadheading 40% of their miles. Warehouse rotations so amateur they looked like someone had designed them by throwing darts at a calendar. The whole system was hemorrhaging $400,000 a month in waste, and nobody had noticed because nobody in this building understood supply chain logistics the way she did. Nobody in most buildings did. She started in her notebook first. Pencil, not pen, because pencil felt safer, felt like something that could be erased if she got caught. Route optimization tables, cost differential calculations, timing matrices that accounted for Port Authority inspection schedules, weather patterns on the Great Lakes, and the specific weight tolerances of 18-wheelers crossing state lines. Then, quietly, without permission, without announcement, she started implementing changes through the logistics software at her desk. Small ones at first. A rerouted container here, a consolidated shipment there. Nothing dramatic enough to trigger alarm. Dominic's men noticed the numbers improving within 10 days, margins tightening, delivery windows shrinking, costs dropping in ways that didn't correspond to any order anyone remembered giving. His lieutenant, the sharp-eyed man with the shaved head who'd shown her the desk, started watching. He'd walk past her station and pause just long enough to see the spreadsheets reflected in her glasses. He didn't say anything, but he watched. Then came Elena Marchetti. She walked into the Thursday operations meeting like a blade in Louboutin stilettos, her dark, chestnut hair center-parted and sleek, the fitted black Dolce & Gabbana sheath dress hugging her angular frame. The slim black leather portfolio with gold corner caps sat on the table in front of her like a weapon. The small beauty mark near the corner of her right upper lip twitched when she noticed Nora sitting in the corner taking notes. Elena looked at Nora the way someone looks at a stain on otherwise perfect upholstery. "Maybe we should get someone more presentable for the client dinners," Elena said, loud enough for the entire table. "Someone who doesn't look like she's hiding in a tent." 7 men in that room. Not one flinched. Not one looked at Nora. Because Nora wasn't a person in that room. She was furniture, and furniture doesn't have feelings. Under the conference table, Nora's hands shook. Her soft, rounded jaw clenched. She looked down at her notebook, wrote the exact words in small, precise letters at the bottom of the page, and kept working. Because that's what invisible people do. They absorb the blow and keep functioning. 3 days later, Nora spotted it. A pattern buried in Port Authority inspection data that Dominic's entire security team had missed. A rival syndicate had been tracking container movements through Calumet Port, timing their intercepts to coincide with shift changes in customs. A $6.2 million shipment was sitting in the crosshairs, and nobody knew. Nobody except the girl hiding in the tent. She compiled the analysis, wrote the rerouting solution, calculated 3 alternative port entries with cost projections for each, and left it all in a manila folder on Dominic's desk at 7:45 p.m. Then, she pulled on her cardigan, tucked her notebook under her left arm, and went home. Dominic found the folder at 8:12. He opened it. He read every page. His pale, ice-blue eyes moved slowly across calculations so precise they looked machine-generated. When he finished, he looked up at the desk outside his office. Her chair was empty. The desk lamp was off. A faint trace of drugstore hand lotion hung in the air. She was already gone, and she had no idea that she'd just become the most important person in his operation. But she didn't feel important. She felt like she always felt, invisible and aching and wrong. She went home to her studio apartment and ate leftover pasta standing at the kitchen counter and hated the softness of her own body in the bathroom mirror. She thought about Dominic's hands when he poured the Macallan, the controlled stillness of him when he sat, the way his dark freckle near his right eye caught shadow when he turned his jaw. She thought about these things, and then she hated herself for thinking them, because she was not the kind of woman men like Dominic Serrano looked at. She was the kind of woman men like him looked past, through, around, a piece of office equipment with a pulse. And still, she went back every morning. Still, she fixed what was broken. Still, she saved what no one asked her to save. On a Tuesday evening in late October, Dominic walked past her desk for the 100th time without looking at her. But this time his hand brushed the edge of her desk as he passed, and his step faltered for half a second before he kept moving. Nora didn't notice. Her head was down, pencil moving across a routing table, the faint birthmark on the left side of her neck just visible below her ear. But the lieutenant noticed. He stood in the hallway with his arms crossed, and he watched his boss's hand trail across that desk like a man reaching for something he hadn't decided to want yet. And the lieutenant said nothing, but he understood everything. 3 months into the job, Nora has saved Dominic's operation $4.7 million, and he still doesn't know her first name. Let that settle in your brain for a second. $4.7 million. Rescued from bleeding contracts, patched up supply chains, rerouted shipments that would have cost 6 figures apiece if they'd landed at the wrong dock. And the man who signs her paychecks, the man whose empire she's been quietly holding together with spreadsheets and a worn brown leather notebook, couldn't pick her name out of a lineup. But Elena Marchetti sure knows it. Elena calls her into a corner office on a Tuesday afternoon, that slim black leather portfolio with the gold corner caps tucked under one angular arm, her Louboutin stilettos clicking like a metronome counting down to something ugly. There's a client dinner Friday night, the Ritz-Carlton. 7 figures of business on the table, representatives from a rival syndicate attending, tension thick enough to cut. Elena needs a logistics coordinator. Translation? She needs a mule. Someone to carry the binders. Someone to organize the seating charts, coordinate with the kitchen, make sure the presentation materials are printed and collated and ready. Someone to do all of that while Elena stands at the head of a mahogany table and presents Nora's own analysis, her own numbers, her own risk models, her own damn routing projections, as if she'd thought of them in the shower that morning. Nora knows the drill. She nods. She writes the details in her notebook, the elastic strap worn thin from 3 months of constant use. Then Elena looks her up and down. Slow, deliberate, eyes tracking from Nora's scuffed black ballet flats up her black stretch slacks, pausing at her hips, her thick waist, her generous bust, and finally landing on her flushed, rounded cheeks with an expression that isn't even cruelty, it's amusement. "We don't have a tablecloth that big, Cafferty. Maybe stay in the service hallway." That beauty mark near the corner of Elena's mouth twitches when she smiles. Friday night. The Ritz-Carlton smells like orchids and old money and barely concealed violence. Crystal chandeliers throw fractured light across linen so white it hurts. Nora stands in the service hallway in her best black dress, size 20, the nicest thing she owns, holding 3 leather binders against her chest like armor. Through the cracked doorway, she can see the table. 8 people. Dominic at the head in his charcoal Tom Ford three-piece, the platinum Patek Philippe catching chandelier light every time he lifts his Macallan. Elena beside him, poised, her thin gold chain glinting at her throat, presenting slide after slide of analysis that Nora built at 2 in the morning on a Wednesday. Then, everything goes sideways. A representative from the rival syndicate, sharp suit, sharper smile, leans forward and mentions intercepted shipments. Casually, the way you'd mention weather, but the temperature at that table drops 15 degrees in half a second. Elena's mouth opens. Nothing comes out. Her dark, almond-shaped eyes dart sideways. Her slim fingers grip the edge of her portfolio, and for 3 terrible seconds, the most put-together woman in the room has absolutely nothing to say. Nora's already moving. Standing in that hallway with her back against the wall, she pulls out her phone and texts Dominic's lieutenant, the same one who noticed that half-second falter at her desk, with the exact counter-routing needed. Port of Newark to a secondary facility in Elizabeth, rerouted through a customs broker she'd flagged 6 weeks ago as clean. 14 containers, 40 minutes, crisis over, done. Handled by a woman in the service hallway who wasn't allowed near the table. Elena recovers beautifully, of course, presents the solution as if she'd been thinking it through all along. Dominic nods at her from the head of the table. His pale, ice-blue eyes betray nothing. Nora watches through the doorway. Her gray-green eyes are dry. She's past the point where this surprises her. But something shifts after that night. Not loudly, not obviously. Dominic starts noticing the absence of problems. Shipments that should have been delayed arriving on time. Invoices that should have had errors coming back clean. A smoothness to operations that feels almost unnatural, like someone greased every gear in the machine while nobody was looking. He asks his lieutenant over bourbon one evening, "Who's responsible?" The lieutenant hesitates, rubs the back of his neck, then says, "Your assistant." Dominic's sharp, angular jaw tilts slightly. That faint cleft chin catches shadow. "Which one?" "The only one, sir. Nora." No reaction. None. Dominic lifts his Macallan, takes a slow sip, sets it down with the precision of a man who controls every molecule of his own movement. The lieutenant leaves. Dominic sits in the dark for 45 minutes. Next morning, for the first time in 3 months, Nora Cafferty gets called into his office. She stands in front of his desk, gripping her notebook so hard her knuckles go white. Her honey-blonde hair is tucked behind her ears, that small birthmark on the left side of her neck exposed like a fingerprint. He asks her to explain the Port Authority rerouting. She stammers, starts twice. Her voice catches on the first technical term, and she wants to die right there on the carpet. Then the logistics take over. 11 unbroken minutes. Container weights, customs clearance windows, broker reliability ratings, fallback routes indexed by risk probability. She speaks with a precision that makes his lieutenant's jaw physically drop. Dominic watches her the entire time. Those pale, ice-blue eyes never blink. His hands rest flat on the desk surface, perfectly still. She finishes. Silence. She waits. He says, "That will be all." She leaves. Her hands shake the entire elevator ride down. She thinks she failed. That night, the parking garage, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, Elena's Louboutins echoing off concrete. She corners Nora beside her 10-year-old Honda. "Stay in your lane, pig. You're a secretary. You file things. You don't talk to him. You don't exist to him. And honestly, look at you. You'll never exist to any man." Every word delivered with surgical calm, that calculating stare fixed on Nora's face. Nora drives home crying, hands at 10 and 2, tears rolling down her flushed, rounded cheeks, her notebook on the passenger seat like a passenger that can't help her. She's done. Not angry done, not dramatic done, just empty, hollowed out. She can't be invisible anymore, can't watch him look through her, can't keep building an empire for people who think she's furniture. Nora sits in her apartment at 2 a.m., resignation letter written on a single sheet of paper, her brown leather notebook on the kitchen table beside it. She picks up the notebook, holds it to her chest, then sets it down and slides it away. She won't take it with her. She won't leave a note. She'll just disappear, the way invisible women do. Monday morning, 8:47 a.m. Dominic Serrano walks past the assistant's desk and the chair is empty. The cardigan is gone. The desk is clean. The brown leather notebook sits centered on the surface like a headstone. No resignation letter, no email, no sticky note, no forwarding address, no polite corporate goodbye. Just a clean desk and 340 pages of genius left behind like an offering to a god she decided she no longer believed in. Her phone is disconnected. Not off, disconnected. The number routes to a carrier message. Her work email bounces. Her building keycard was left in the top drawer, placed neatly beside a pen she'd borrowed from the front desk 6 weeks ago. Nora Cafferty didn't just quit. She performed surgery on her own existence, cut every thread connecting her to this building, to this man, to this life, and cauterized the wound behind her. And here's the thing about Dominic Serrano. He doesn't shout. He doesn't throw anything. He doesn't summon his lieutenant or bark orders into a phone. He walks into his office, sits down behind the desk, and stares at the empty chair through the glass partition. 20 minutes. The pale, ice-blue eyes don't blink. The sharp, angular jaw doesn't clench. The heavy, brushed platinum Patek Philippe on his left wrist ticks through 1,200 seconds of absolute stillness. And every single person on that floor feels the temperature drop. Then he stands, walks to her desk, picks up the notebook, the worn brown leather, the elastic strap. He opens it. 3 hours. He reads for 3 hours. Every page, every margin note, every tight line of her neat, cramped handwriting. Route optimizations that saved his operation 6 figures a month. Pattern analyses on Port Authority inspection schedules that no one asked her to build. Contingency plans for scenarios his senior people hadn't even imagined. And then the small ones. The personal ones. The annotations she wrote like whispered prayers in the margins. D prefers the 6 p.m. shipment window. Build buffer. Check if D has eaten. He forgets. D's Tuesday meeting runs long. Pre-stage Wednesday briefing materials by 4 p.m. She'd been taking care of him. Not just his empire. Him. The man who forgot to eat. The man who preferred a specific shipping window because it meant his drivers hit less traffic and got home to their families. She'd noticed that. She'd written it down. She'd built it into the architecture of his entire operation like rebar inside concrete. Invisible, essential, holding everything together. Dominic closes the notebook. His hands are not steady. That's when his lieutenant knows something is very, very wrong. Because Dominic Serrano's hands are always steady. Steady when he signs death warrants. Steady when he holds a Macallan 18 after burying a man. Steady when the world burns. Not now. He tells his lieutenant it's a security concern. His voice is flat, controlled, mechanical. She knows too much about the operation. Routes, schedules, supplier names, port contacts. She could be compromised. She could talk. He needs to find her. The lieutenant nods. He doesn't believe the reason. Neither does Dominic. But the fiction serves its purpose, and 6 men are deployed within the hour. Her Pilsen apartment is the first stop. Doors unlocked, lights off. Furniture still there. The sagging blue couch, the scratched kitchen table, the small TV she probably never watched. But the closet is empty. Hangers bare. The fridge is cleared out, wiped clean, unplugged. She left like someone who's done this before. Someone who knows how to make herself disappear because she spent 27 years practicing invisibility. The world finally taught her the lesson too well. Her mother in Rockford hasn't heard from her. Doesn't seem particularly concerned. Her bank account shows a single transaction after a modest final withdrawal. A Greyhound ticket purchased to Detroit. One way. $63. Her social media, what little existed, is deleted. Not deactivated. Deleted. Accounts scrubbed. Digital footprint erased with the same methodical precision she brought to rerouting container ships across the Great Lakes. Nora Cafferty didn't run. She evaporated. Meanwhile, 7 hours east on I-94, that same woman sits cross-legged on a thin motel bedspread in a $79 a night room outside Detroit, eating gas station chicken soup from a styrofoam cup. Her honey blonde hair is unwashed, tucked behind her ears without the tortoiseshell barrette. Her gray-green eyes are swollen. She's wearing an old Michigan State sweatshirt 3 sizes too big and leggings with a hole in the left knee. And she's scrolling through warehouse coordinator postings on a laptop with a cracked hinge. She is miserable. She is also, for the first time in months, not in pain. Nobody is looking through her. Nobody is walking past her like she's furniture. Nobody is reminding her how much space she takes up, how her soft, heavy curves and thick waist and wide hips are an inconvenience to the aesthetic of some glass-walled office. The relief and the grief are exactly the same size, filling the same cavity in her chest, and she can't tell which one is breathing and which one is suffocating. Back in Chicago, Dominic becomes unmanageable. That's the only word his people have for it. Without Nora's invisible corrections, the logistics begin to fail. A $3.8 million shipment sits in a Milwaukee rail yard for 36 hours because nobody caught the scheduling conflict she would have flagged at a glance. A Port Authority inspection pattern she'd mapped in the notebook, page 217, margin note, red ink, goes unnoticed. A warehouse on the south side is raided, $1.2 million in losses. Elena Marchetti tries to fill the gap, clicking across the floor in her black patent Louboutins, slim black leather portfolio tucked under her arm, dark brown eyes sharp and calculating. She fails spectacularly. 2 logistics contractors are fired in a single week. Small absence. Catastrophic collapse. One woman's quiet departure, and the machine starts grinding itself apart. His lieutenant finally says it plainly. Standing in the doorway of Dominic's office at 11 p.m. on a Thursday, watching his boss read the brown leather notebook for the 4th time. "It's not about security, sir. You miss her." Dominic's ice-blue eyes go flat and dangerous, the kind of stillness that usually precedes someone losing teeth. He says nothing for a long time. Then, quiet as a closing door, "Find her. Now." Dominic stands in Nora's empty Pilsen apartment. Door open, lights off, furniture still there but closet empty, fridge cleared out, holding the brown leather notebook in both hands, and for the first time his lieutenant sees something on his boss's face that looks like fear. Dominic Serrano walks into a $79 a night motel outside Detroit at 11 p.m., alone, wearing a $12,000 Tom Ford overcoat, and finds Nora Cafferty sitting on the bed in sweatpants eating ramen from a styrofoam cup. She freezes. The plastic fork hovers halfway to her mouth, a single limp noodle dangling. Her gray-green eyes go wide. The worn brown leather notebook sits on the nightstand beside a half-empty water bottle and a crumpled gas station receipt. Her honey blonde hair is clipped back with that same plain tortoiseshell barrette, unwashed, flat against her skull. No makeup. Sweatpants with a bleach stain on the left thigh. An oversized hoodie 3 sizes too big, the sleeves pulled down over her knuckles. She looks like a woman who drove 6 hours to disappear. He stands in the doorway. The fluorescent hallway light cuts his silhouette sharp. Broad shoulders, military posture, that heavy, brushed platinum Patek Philippe catching the glow. His pale, ice-blue eyes sweep the room once. Stained carpet, particle board dresser, a television bolted to the wall from sometime around 2004. He doesn't flinch. He walks in, closes the door, sits in the single plastic chair across from her. This man in his bespoke charcoal suit, this man whose name makes federal prosecutors lose sleep, and he folds his hands on his knees. "You left your notebook." Nora stares at him. Her rounded cheeks flush that warm pink, the pale freckles across her nose standing out sharp. She sets down the ramen cup very slowly. "That's why you came? For the notebook?" "No." One word. He says it like it costs him something. And then something happens that Nora Cafferty has never witnessed in 6 weeks of working 3 feet from this man. Dominic Serrano struggles to speak. Not because he's angry, not because he's calculating, because he doesn't do this. Vulnerability is a foreign language, and he's speaking it with an accent so thick it barely sounds like words. The operation is failing. That's what he tells her in short, halting sentences, his jaw tight, his gaze fixed on the wall behind her head because looking at her while he says this is apparently too much. His $200,000 a year consultants missed what she caught in a spiral-bound notebook with a $4 pen. The Calumet corridor routing she flagged saved 11 minutes per vehicle. The shell company overlap she circled in red ink exposed a leak his entire security team hadn't found in 8 months. Every page he read was a map of his empire drawn by someone who understood it better than the people running it. Nora's throat moves. "You didn't even know my name." Nora Cafferty. No hesitation. 27, Pilsen. Bachelor's in Supply Chain Management, minor in Applied Mathematics. He pauses. The small, dark freckle near his right eye catches the dim lamplight. "You take your coffee with 2 sugars, and you think nobody notices when you skip lunch." She goes perfectly still. Her hands grip the edge of the mattress, knuckles white. Because he noticed. Every single thing. He just didn't know how to say it, and honestly, that might be the saddest sentence she's ever understood about another person. So she tells him why she left. Not the logistics, not the NDA concerns. She tells him about Elena Marchetti's voice echoing off concrete in that parking garage, the word liability, the word pig. She tells him about every conference room where she pressed herself against the wall so her hips wouldn't brush someone's chair. Every meeting where she had the answer but swallowed it because opening her mouth meant being seen, and being seen meant being measured, and being measured meant being found excessive. She tells him about Victor Hargrove and the way he said, "Take up less space," like it was career advice instead of cruelty. "I'm tired of taking up space in rooms where nobody wants me." His jaw tightens. Something moves behind those ice-blue eyes, something cold and vast and absolutely lethal, and when he speaks, his voice is low and final. "You take up exactly the space you are meant to." He says it like a verdict, like a sentencing, like the universe made an error and he is correcting it personally. Then he asks her to come back. Not as an assistant, as his head of operations. $340,000 a year. Full authority, direct report to him and him alone. Nora's breath catches, her soft, rounded jaw works, but nothing comes out for a long moment. "I need to think." "I'll wait." He means it literally. Dominic Serrano sits in that plastic chair in a $79 motel room outside Detroit while Nora Cafferty sleeps. He doesn't move. He doesn't check his phone. His lieutenant calls twice. He silences it both times. At some point around 3 a.m., Nora rolls over and sees him still sitting there, overcoat folded neatly across his lap, hands clasped, watching the door like something might come through it that he'd need to kill. In the morning, she says yes. The return to Chicago happens fast. Dominic installs her in the penthouse suite at the Drake Hotel. $2,800 a night, lake view, marble floors, fresh peonies on the entry table. By noon, a personal tailor arrives with a measuring tape and a rolling rack. Nora stands in her underwear, arms crossed tight over her stomach, her full figure exposed and trembling, humiliated in a way that has nothing to do with the stranger taking measurements and everything to do with a lifetime of being told her body is a problem to solve. The tailor works without comment, professional, efficient. Dominic stands in the doorway with his back turned, giving her privacy, and says 5 words to the tailor without looking. Every piece fits her, not the other way around. Room service arrives that evening. A full spread across the suite's dining table. Seared ribeye, roasted vegetables, a chocolate torte so dark it's almost black. Nora hesitates. Her hand drifts toward the side salad. Dominic sits across from her, pushes the steak plate forward with 2 fingers. "Eat." "I shouldn't." "You should. You will. No one in my presence goes hungry, and no one in my presence apologizes for being alive." She eats. She eats everything. He watches her with an expression that is not pity. It is open, undisguised hunger, not for the food. The next morning, the wardrobe arrives. Nora steps into a custom-tailored, deep burgundy wrap dress that hugs every curve of her body like it was sculpted for her. Black Louboutin heels, diamond studs, her honey blonde waves brushed soft past her shoulders. She stands in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror in the penthouse suite of the Drake Hotel. Her hips are still wide, her heavy thighs still pressed together, her stomach still rounds soft against the fabric. But the dress doesn't hide her. It frames her. The birthmark on the left side of her neck sits just above the neckline like a signature. Her eyes sting. She starts to cry, then stops. She lifts her chin, and for the first time, Nora Cafferty doesn't look away from her own reflection. Nora Cafferty walks into Dominic Serrano's operations room for the first time as his head of operations, wearing the burgundy wrap dress, her brown leather notebook in her left hand, and every man in the room turns to look at her. Not because she's small, not because she's quiet, because the door opened and something shifted in the air pressure of that room, something none of them had a name for yet. Elena Marchetti's face went white, not pale, white. The blood drained out from under that warm, ivory skin like someone had pulled a plug, and her dark, almond-shaped eyes locked onto Nora with the kind of recognition that only comes when you realize the person you dismissed just walked in wearing authority like a second skin. Her slim black leather portfolio with the gold corner caps pressed tight against her ribs. Her thin, arched brows climbed half an inch. Nora didn't acknowledge her, didn't even glance in her direction. She walked to the central table, set her worn brown leather notebook down with the elastic strap facing out, and opened the logistics dashboard on the main screen. The honey blonde waves tucked behind her ears caught the overhead light. The small birthmark on the left side of her neck sat visible above the wrap dress's neckline. Her gray-green eyes moved across the data like a surgeon reading a scan. Then she started talking. 3 shipments rerouted in real time. A Port Authority inspection pattern identified from 6 weeks of timestamp data that nobody in that room had bothered to cross-reference. Potential losses of $890,000 flagged, isolated, and neutralized before the first hour was up. She spoke in clear, measured sentences. No stammering, no hedging. Just facts delivered with the calm precision of someone who'd been doing this math in her head for years and was finally allowed to say it out loud. 40 minutes. That's all it took. The room went silent. Not impressed silent, scared silent, because every man standing around that table had just watched a woman in a burgundy wrap dress do in 40 minutes what their entire logistics team hadn't managed in 2 years. And Elena Marchetti watched it all with her pointed chin lifted and her calculating dark brown eyes narrowing into something venomous. The sabotage started within 24 hours. Elena fed bad intelligence to a rival syndicate contact, specific enough to create a crisis, vague enough to keep her fingerprints off it. She wanted a shipment seized, a loss big enough to make Nora look incompetent. And while that was cooking, she started whispering. Quiet words dropped into the ears of Dominic's men during shift changes and in parking garages. A fat girl playing dress-up. A liability. She'll crack under pressure. Just watch. 2 of the men laughed. The lieutenant did not. But Elena wasn't the only threat circling. A competing syndicate had been watching. They'd identified Nora as Dominic Serrano's new acquisition, and they saw exactly what small minds always see when they look at a plus-size woman in a position of power. A soft target. The man found her in the Drake Hotel lobby on a Tuesday evening. She was crossing from the elevator to the restaurant, her notebook tucked under her left arm, her full figure moving with the new, deliberate posture she was still learning to trust. He stepped into her path. Mid-40s, expensive watch, cheap smile. Tell your boss we know about his new pet. He let his gaze drag down her body. She's a big target, easy to find. He smirked at the double meaning like he'd rehearsed it in the mirror. Nora's hands trembled, her rounded cheeks flushed hot pink. But her gray-green eyes stayed fixed on his face, cataloging. Square jaw, slight overbite, tag Heuer on the left wrist, Italian leather loafers with a scuff on the right toe, faint Boston accent flattening the vowels. She memorized every detail with the same forensic precision she brought to shipping manifests. 15 minutes later, she sat across from Dominic and reported it all. Every word, every detail. Clinical. Precise. Her voice only shook once, on the word pet, and she pushed through it like it was a speed bump on a highway. Dominic's pale, ice-blue eyes didn't blink. His heavy-lidded gaze stayed fixed on her face. One hand rested flat on the table. The Patek Philippe Nautilus caught the light. He found the man within 6 hours. The details came second-hand, through the lieutenant, delivered in the clipped tone of someone reporting weather. The man won't be making comments again. Dominic's white French cuff shirt had to be replaced. That was all anyone needed to know. Dominic returned to the Drake that night, found Nora at the desk in the penthouse suite, her notebook open, 3 screens running logistics data, her honey blonde hair falling loose around her soft, rounded jaw. He stood in the doorway in a fresh charcoal Tom Ford suit, his sharp, angular jaw set, the small dark freckle near his right eye barely visible in the low light. "Nobody touches what is mine." She looked up, her plump lips pressed together. "I'm not yours. You are." He didn't move, didn't raise his voice. "You just don't know it yet." She held his gaze for 3 full seconds, then turned back to her screens. But something shifted in her posture. The hunch in her shoulders loosened by a fraction of an inch, and then she found it. It started as an anomaly, inflated invoices on bulk shipping containers, numbers that didn't match port of origin documentation. She pulled the thread. Phantom shipments, ghost freight billed at full rate through 7 shell companies, all routing back through a single logistics provider. The fraud totaled $47.6 million, skimmed over 2 years. The source was Hargrove Logistics, Victor Hargrove. That sweating, jowly, signet ring-wearing son of a bitch had been feeding off Dominic's supply chain like a parasite. And his inside contact, the person routing the falsified documentation through Dominic's own systems, was Elena Marchetti. Nora presented the evidence in the operations room, every man present. Elena standing at the far end of the table with her slim black portfolio clutched against her chest. Nora opened her worn brown leather notebook to a specific page and read aloud. Routing numbers, dates, dollar amounts. 47.6 million in fraudulent billing traced through 7 shells back to Hargrove Logistics. Elena's portfolio slipped from her hands and hit the floor. Dominic didn't look at Elena. He looked at Nora. His expression was something between fury and awe, those ice-blue eyes burning with both at once. Nora stands over the conference table covered in shipping manifests and financial documents, having just dismantled a $47.6 million fraud scheme that Victor Hargrove was running through Dominic's own supply chain, and she looks up at Dominic and says, without stammering, "You're welcome." The room is silent. The lieutenant almost smiles. The fallout is swift and absolute. Elena Marchetti is removed from the building within the hour, and Dominic Serrano makes a single phone call to arrange a meeting with Victor Hargrove. 2 of Dominic's men flank Elena as she walks the corridor. Her black Louboutin stilettos click a funeral march against the polished concrete. Her slim black leather portfolio with the gold corner caps is tucked under one arm like a shield that stopped working. And right there, right at the threshold where the hallway meets the elevator bay, she stops. She turns. She finds Nora. Her dark, almond-shaped eyes narrow to slits. That small beauty mark near the corner of her mouth twitches, and she hisses it, every ounce of venom she's got left compressed into one ugly sentence. "You think this lasts? You think he wants you? Look at you. Look at you." Like those 3 words are a mirror she's trying to shove into Nora's hands. But here's the thing about mirrors. They only work if the person looking believes what they see. Nora steps close enough that Elena, 5'8" in heels, has to tilt her chin up. Close enough that Elena can see the light scatter of pale freckles across the bridge of Nora's nose, the small birthmark shaped like a thumbprint on the left side of her neck just below the ear. Close enough that the woman who called her a pig can feel the warmth radiating from every inch of Nora Cafferty's full, unwavering 230-pound frame. And Nora says it quietly. No stammer, no shake, just granite wrapped in velvet. I take up exactly the space I am meant to. You should have learned to do the same. Elena opens her mouth. Nothing comes out. She is driven to O'Hare in a black sedan with tinted windows. She is not seen again. Now, Victor Hargrove. Dominic arranges the meeting at Hargrove's own office, that same glass and chrome tower on Wacker Drive, that same conference room with the long mahogany table and the ergonomic chairs that cost more than Nora's annual rent. The room where she used to sit in the back row, invisible, clutching her worn brown leather notebook while men with half her talent talked over her. She walks through the door wearing a tailored black Tom Ford blazer over a cream silk blouse, the notebook tucked under her left arm like always. Her gray-green eyes are steady. Her honey blonde hair is swept back from her rounded cheeks. Her shoulders are straight. Hargrove is already seated. That same ill-fitting navy pinstripe suit, that same yellow silk tie loosened at the throat, those same sweat stains creeping from his collar. His gold signet ring catches the overhead light as his thick fingers drum the table. He sees Nora and his ruddy face drains, goes the color of old paper. His small, pale brown eyes blink rapidly behind those bushy, sandy gray brows, and you can practically hear his brain short-circuiting. The woman he called not a culture fit. The woman he fired in front of 40 people because she didn't look right for client meetings. She's standing in his office holding a federal forensic audit report that she compiled. Every fraudulent invoice, every phantom shipment, every dummy corporation traced and documented in her precise handwriting. She sets it on his desk. The same desk. The same damn desk. You told me I wasn't a culture fit, Nora says. Her voice doesn't waver, not one syllable. You were right. Your culture is fraud. Hargrove clutches his forehead. His $47.6 million scheme, every cent of it, laid bare in black and white. And the federal investigators are already in the lobby. He can hear them. Dress shoes on marble, badges coming through security. His company is finished. He is finished. And the woman who finished him is already walking out the door. That evening, returning to the Drake Hotel, Nora stumbles on the marble steps. Exhaustion. Heels she's still not used to. The accumulated weight of a day that burned an empire down. Her ankle turns, and she pitches forward, and before her hands hit stone, he catches her. Dominic doesn't ask if she's okay. He doesn't steady her and step back. Without a single word, he lifts her, all 230 pounds of her, into his arms and carries her through the lobby, past the concierge, who averts his eyes, past the bellman, who holds the door, into the gold-paneled elevator with its mirrored ceiling. You don't have to, she starts. You weigh nothing to me. 4 words, flat, final, like stating the temperature outside. He carries her to the penthouse, sets her on the bed with the care you'd give something irreplaceable. Then he kneels. He takes her right foot in his hands, those scarred knuckles, that heavy, brushed platinum Patek Philippe Nautilus glinting on his left wrist, and he removes her shoe. Then the left, gentle, deliberate, and Nora watches this man who controls a city kneeling at her feet, and something inside her that was broken for a very long time clicks into place. He sits on the edge of the bed. She reaches for him. He catches her wrist, gently, and presses his mouth to the inside of it, right where her pulse hammers. You are mine, he says. Every inch, every curve, every part of you that anyone ever told you was too much, that is mine, and I will end anyone who makes you feel small. She pulls him to her. His hands trace the curve of her hip, slow and deliberate, and her breath catches against his jaw, and the city lights of Chicago pour through the penthouse window like liquid gold, and for the first time in her life, Nora Cafferty does not wish she were smaller. 1 month later, the Drake Hotel ballroom, crystal chandeliers refracting light across 300 guests, Chicago's elite, political donors, philanthropy board members. And scattered among them like debris from a shipwreck, former employees of Hargrove Logistics, now unemployed. The hiring manager, who wanted someone more client-facing, is carrying a tray of canapés for the catering company. Victor Hargrove's name is in every paper, his assets seized, his reputation ash. Nora enters on Dominic's arm, custom emerald green gown, size 20, catching the light like liquid. Her honey blonde hair swept up, diamond earrings, the faint birthmark on her neck visible and uncovered for the first time. And tucked under her left arm, the worn brown leather notebook with the elastic strap. She never lets it go. The room turns. Every eye finds her. The former co-workers who laughed in the break room, the ones who whispered. They see her now. They all see her. Dominic leans close, his pale, ice-blue eyes scanning the crowd, and murmurs, "They're all looking at you." Nora sips her champagne, calm, unhurried, the quiet authority of a woman who burned herself down and rebuilt from the notebook up. Let them. Nora Cafferty stands at the center of the Drake Hotel ballroom, a glass of champagne in one hand and her worn brown leather notebook tucked under her arm, surrounded by people who see her, and she takes up all the space she wants. If this story hit you somewhere real, subscribe. The next one's already coming.